Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick. I'm Matt Atchity, that's Ben Mankiewicz, Alonzo Duralde, and Christy Lemire. We are here to talk about Bright Lights.
Ben,
oh yeah,
this
so
is your thing,
this
Ben.
is the documentary about the relationship between Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, and they both fully participated in it. And Todd Fisher, it's really a look at their family with them sort of talking about their relationship. It was supposed to come out later this year. It was finished more quickly than expected, and then
it premiered at Toronto.
So I guess they weren't tinkering. I thought they were still tinkering.
I thought. I mean,
maybe they were just holding.
A version premiered at Toronto was supposed to.
Yeah, it was in
March
Telluride
originally. Yeah.
So I thought they were still tinkering, but whatever it was basic either way. No matter what, it was basically done. But it was the release date was moved up in light of what happened at the end of December. Carrie Fisher dying and her mother dying the next day.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, shit. Sorry.
Spoiler.
Watch that clip, Matt. We're talking about that too.
And this is from Alexis Bloom and
Fisher
Stevens. As you'll see a little bit from this clip, I'm not sure what the clip that we have of it, but it gives you some significant insight, but not full insight into the massive degree of connectivity that Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds had.
My mother, she'll forget. She's not 35. Age is horrible for all of us, but she falls from a greater height.
Manic depressive is a disease. That was not diagnosed then. So nobody kind of knew what was going on with Carrie.
I went too fast. I was too much. I couldn't handle it.
It's really hard to talk about this movie just as a movie, right?
Right.
Because it has
Well,
so
yeah.
much retroactive poignancy and lines and scenes that are just eerie because they were both pretty matter of fact about the possibility of dying, you know? And Debbie Reynolds would say, like, you know, I won't be here then, I'll be in the great beyond when she gets her next Lifetime Achievement Award. And there's a lot of asides that now have greater weight. And
That's how it ends, with sort of
Yeah.
basically with the Lifetime Achievement Award. I believe actually it's called the Life Achievement
At the
Award. from
SAG
At the
Awards.
SAG Awards, which was, I think, last year, right?
2 years
Or
ago?
maybe
2
it
years
was
ago.
2 years
Yeah.
ago. And I'm obviously instantly curious. Did you see it? Is that how it ended in Toronto, or you can't remember?
Oh, I didn't. I wasn't at Toronto. I just heard that it's.
I'm just curious whether that's the kind of thing you might
right.
Oh, right.
you might change to give it a slightly different meaning. It would be an okay thing to do. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'd be curious to ask the directors if there was ever that possibility. But it definitely gives you, you read of how bonded they were, and then you see the movie, and seeing it changes your perspective on it, because it instantly goes from, oh, they weren't just close. There was a fusion happening here between mother and daughter that is not, it's not creepy. It's actually quite, I thought it was quite
Yeah,
nice.
I mean, it's not Grey Gardens. There's maybe, if you wanted to call them codependent, you wouldn't necessarily be wrong. But I think for the most part, it's presented as a good thing. I mean, there is a closeness, there is an intimacy, that they took care of each other in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they're definitely codependent, but there was a degree of that made them probably stronger. That their codependency worked for them. It's not terribly unhealthy. It didn't keep
As codependencies go.
right. But I mean, it didn't keep them. It doesn't appear from leading full lives in other directions.
Sure.
It was the best family they had, and they just, instead of, Debbie had the failed marriages, Carrie's relationships were troubled, and obviously the bipolar disorder and the drug addictions. This was sort of, they found strength in each other. What was missing from this, I thought, was famously they didn't speak for like 10 years, 12 years, some significant number of years where Carrie Fisher wouldn't talk to Debbie Reynolds because it was just too hard for her being Debbie Reynolds' daughter. And obviously, since that ended, and that was incredibly hard for Debbie, and I presume hard for Carrie too, since they found each other and became so close, having a few minutes where they discussed that difficult period would have added significant
This was a
value
thing
to
that
this.
happened, and we
right,
got through it.
I kept waiting. I was like, oh, I'm going to cry when they talk
Yeah.
about this part, and then them coming back together, and then it's just not there.
And not even in passing.
No,
not
it's
even like
it's not at all.
a glimmer of
If you didn't
that.
know it, you'd think
Yeah.
they were just always fused.
There's sort of an erratic nature to this because it does seem so candid, right? And Carrie Fisher was always unvarnished and telling it like it is. There's a great deal of archival footage here. There's a really disturbing segment where It's like 1988, 89.
Yeah, she's a manic episode
she's
on the
manic
Great
on the Great
Wall
Wall
of
of
China.
China, and she's very candid about the name she gives to the various sides of her personality. But then, yeah, there are these gaps, and there are times where you feel like they're like lifetime performers. They're always on. They're always on in the role that they've devised for themselves, right?
Well,
so no matter what, like Debbie Reynolds was what, 82 when this was shot, right?
It was shot all the way back in 2010.
Right.
I was
too,
going to
so-
say,
No,
you can tell like she's aging over the course
You
of
can
the
tell
film.
she's
even.
aging, but also, there's a guilelessness to her persona, right? There's like a sweetness and a buoyancy and a kind of a lovable kind of daffy naivete to Debbie Reynolds' persona the whole way through. That's her being on in that role she's devised for herself, and and they have their banter and they have their prescribed roles, and no matter what happens, it's funny, it's entertaining, but like they're gonna stick to those
their
lanes
shtick.
they've chosen to.
I think the movie kind of acknowledges that though. There's that interview sequence, and they kind of, it's a long take. Like you can tell it's all sort of raw footage because the first thing you see is the boom mic. But then they pan down, and Debbie Reynolds is sitting there, and she sounds like she's on the verge of tears, not in that way that she really is, but how sometimes you can't control your emotions or whatever. And then you see her sort of take this deep breath.
Right.
Her face kind of sets in this smile. And she's Debbie Reynolds.
She's a pro.
Like, I went to MGM High, and this is how I learned to deal with the public. And so it's interesting. I think the movie shows you that moment
They're
to
aware of
acknowledge,
that.
hey, when she's on camera, most likely she is being
on.
Debbie. She is Debbie Reynolds. She is not Mary Frances.
That's interesting because I'd forgotten about that. The some of the most candid moments are like before the interview starts. There's some audio only because Debbie literally won't let herself be shot because she doesn't think she looks good enough. She doesn't feel well enough. She's sick. That seems honest. That moment that you talked about seemed honest, where she's like, all right, we're going to get through this. Right? And so you get a little bit of that. Carrie had it much more because we actually saw a late manic episode too where she knew it and she was like, I don't know whether you're
She's
real.
getting her nails
the
done
nails
Nails
before
done.
the
She
SAG
cries. She's
Awards,
like,
right?
I'm a little bit manic right now. It'll essentially she's like, it'll pass. And that was clearly a
She's self-aware.
when I interviewed Debbie for an hour and she killed it. The crowd loved her on the TCM cruise. But I thought that, and when we went to dinner together at a big dinner with a bunch of other people who were on the cruise, and she was performing the whole time. Like, there was no question that this was her shtick. And then on stage, it went great. The audience loved her, so it's a win all across the board. I thought afterwards, I didn't really
Meet her.
Right.
I didn't really get that. I didn't really have a moment where I thought, oh, wow. Whereas, even in little conversations, like, I had a long conversation with Max von Sydow, and somehow I thought, that's an interesting, I got, something came out of that. So which is fine, because it's a great shtick, right? And maybe that is what she was, but that's why that moment of where clearly it was Debbie who decided that she loved being a mother, she loved performing and being a mother in life. So hearing Debbie talk candidly about the pain of not having Carrie in her life for a decade, I think would have added a lot. That said, start to finish, consistently interested in what happened next. And, and it never, there's not a moment, it's not boring.
It's quick.
Yeah,
it's only an hour and a half. It moved by really well. We should mention also the weirdness of Todd and his wife and the therapy chicken.
Oh, yeah,
There's all kinds of weirdness with Todd in Las Vegas. But he of course, is also defined by her. Like, his entire living room in his house is all the posters following her love life. Her life and her love life.
Right,
and
right.
how
Which he uses
matter
to tell,
of fact he is
which he
about
uses
that,
to tell his story. It's not even her story.
Right.
That's how he.
And he's almost always wearing a hat, and the hat almost always is a Todd A.O. hat, which is the process that Mike Todd invented, and he was named for Mike Todd, who was married to Elizabeth Taylor.
Oh,
et cetera,
I
et
never
cetera,
knew
et cetera.
that was Todd A.O., where that came from.
That's where that comes from.
Very good.
And again, we
okay.
mentioned this then, but I mean, he's named Todd Fisher because Mike Todd was Eddie Fisher's best friend, and then when Mike Todd died, Eddie Fisher and Elizabeth Taylor, though it was portrayed as just this awful scandal, Elizabeth Taylor had lost a husband, probably the first husband she really loved, in Mike Todd, and Eddie Fisher lost his best friend. So while it was terrible for Debbie Reynolds, there's we restore some humanity back to that affair because these people had just lost critically important people in their lives, and they went to each other. And then it flamed out, as you would imagine it would. So it stops being just a tabloid story and becomes, this, to me, a much more human tragedy.
I was fascinated with the moment that we get of Carrie caretaking for, like, Death's Door Eddie.
Oh, that was
something I
That
didn't really know
was
about, and that was
painful.
really
Oh, God,
And I'll tell
yeah.
you, it's funny. And after watching this, I then went to HBO Go and watched Wishful Drinking again.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And they make a really good double feature.
Okay, I've never seen that. I should watch
Oh,
that.
you should.
I will.
Yeah, that's good.
Did anything in this surprise you besides the Eddie Fisher
The Eddie
moment?
Fisher thing
Anything
did.
else surprise you?
I had no idea that there was a point where Debbie Reynolds did a Vegas show and she dragooned Carrie and Todd
God.
into being in it with her.
Oh, so awkward. Yeah.
the Carrie Fisher's house, like, you know, they live together, and then the way Carrie's house.
Well, they had
is
the
like
same compound, 2 different houses.
right, 2 different houses. They live next to each other on the same
My
compound.
best friend in high school, that was his house.
Really?
Yeah,
Which
I
one?
know that house
That
well.
Coldwater
Fisher's
Canyon
house?
house?
Yeah, that Coldwater
It had
Canyon
been
house.
owned by, who did she mention?
So it was originally owned by Edith Head,
Okay.
and
Yes.
then the Luckman family of Luckman Properties. And when they moved in, there were a bunch of leftover costumes in the garage, and so they had that house. And I remember in the early 90s, we were hanging out as Carrie was looking to buy the house, and she would just drop by. She would just drop by. She just completely unannounced. She'd drop by, and we, you know, being like in our early 20s, totally geeking out. Of
course.
And like, oh my God, it's Princess Leia. Oh my God. And she's like, guys, relax. And she was just very matter of fact, tiny. But she'd be like, dudes, I'm just here to look at the house. Chill out. Like,
Oh,
yeah.
and speaking of Princess Leia, I really liked the
Yes.
the scene at the Comic-Con thing
Yeah.
where she's doing the autographs and interacting with the fans and stuff, and kind of talking about how she's sort of the vessel of Princess Leia, how this character means so much to so many people, and she's sort of the representative. You know,
Yeah.
I thought that was a cool.
Yeah,
moment.
that thing, you know, when she said Princess Leia is going to be at my tombstone, I am her, she is me. Like,
Right.
there's a wonderful acceptance of that on her part, where so many stars are resistant to being, you know, and Harrison Ford, and understandably Harrison Ford is like, yeah, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Carrie Fisher was not. It wasn't like she was eager to keep doing it, but she was like, I can't be done with it. It defines me.
Yeah.
And so she's so kind to these fans, whereas all of us who spent any time here want to be like, and point our fingers at these people who are
Wait in
how
line
could you,
for 8
how could you wait in
hours?"
line for 10 hours? And they do it because it's something they love, and she reminds us, hey, don't make fun of them. This is awesome.
Right.
And
This
she has
is
fun
awesome.
with
and
them.
Yeah, she's great. So
It's sweet.
those are some of the things that I thought made it special. But her house is a crazy house. It's like
Yeah.
a carnival. It's got all these crazy stuff, all these colors. And then, so what I found interesting was then comparing that to see the house, the regimented sort of almost
the museum she grew up in.
totally
yeah.
this sort of German house that she grew up in, where everything is precise and the angles
Big
are
glass walls.
You get
I
the
like
feeling-
that house.
but you get the feeling there was never a mess.
Yeah,
there.
you wouldn't want to be a child in that
cold.
house.
Right,
was
cold.
cold.
She says it was cold, and so anyway.
And
So
plenty of reaction shots from Gary. If you want to see a lot of Gary.
a lot of the
Carrie
Gary the
Fisher.
dog,
But not a lot of Billy.
Not a lot of no.
That-
She clearly didn't.
Yeah.
Want to
Yeah.
So
because she's there a couple of times
In the
uh,
background.
in the SAG
but-
Award night when they're getting in the
Yeah.
limos, whatever.
and they talk about her, but she didn't want to do
a
it.
lot of Gary.
So anyway, it's certainly worth seeing. I give it an 8.
I'm saying 8 also. You said 7.8.
7.8. Yeah, it's. I mean, you could split hairs about its documentary qualities, but just if you're interested in either or both of these women, I think you'll get a lot. Out
It's
of it.
very entertaining and very moving now. So our number is I didn't do
7.9.
7.9. I didn't do division. Yeah, I was distracted. Okay, it's at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yep.
The folks who have reviewed it.
Yep, they love it.
Hard to imagine anybody who cared at all about these women, and if you love movies, you care about these women.
Yeah,
Hard.
you can't
This is
crap on
This
this
is
movie,
valuable.
you know.
This is you should see it.
Bye.